Okay, magic makers, we're going to talk about something that many of us really don't want to think about. Many of us don't even talk about this. And, it's something that it's coming for us. Many of you listening here, you're over 40. Our parents are in their 70s and beyond. And I don't know, I visit my parents every Christmas and I see it. Like I see what it's like to age. And the goal here is to hopefully age with grace, age with dignity. But as a child of that aging parent, sometimes you're like, what the hell are we gonna do with mom or dad or what have you? So today I have Miss Leslie Hurst here, and we're going to talk about how do we manage aging parents so that it's not this crisis moment that you're like, oh shit, we have to figure it out. That you're going to have these difficult conversations no one ever wants to talk about. Have them now so that as things progress, there's no surprises and there's no what would mom or dad want. So welcome to the show, Leslie.
Thank you, Kim, so much for having me. This is a topic I'm extremely passionate about, so I can't wait to chat about it.
So, your background is you are a nurse. And did you start into nursing saying that you wanted to work more on the kind of golden years of life, or did it just something that just worked out for you?
Well, I think I've always had a heart for seniors, that's for sure. But when I went into nursing, I followed my mom's footsteps into nursing. But I joke all the time that I actually majored in rugby and minored in nursing. Like I went to school, I was more, but I started my career actually in pediatrics. So I thought
Ah,
I was at the hospital for sick kids in Toronto for a brief period of time after like in my pre-grad and after I graduated. And then sort of my rugby aspirations took me elsewhere, which opened up an opportunity for me to really consider home care nursing. So I ended up in the community because the hospital setting wasn't terribly supportive of my aspirations athletically. They just needed to know that when I came there, not only could I be there, but I could care for the babies with like two good arms, and rugby's a
true.
physical sport.
You could have a black eye and be like, it's fine, I'm going to take care of your baby.
Yeah, I mean, I would be fine, but when I actually had a shoulder injury where I was only able to work with kids from a certain weight and younger, and it was like, this
Oh,
isn't the best fit. I
yeah.
can nurse forever, but I can only play rugby for this long. And it actually turned out to be a huge turning point and a blessing for me because being in the homes of senior families across the province of Ontario through the last 26 years, you see what happens when someone gets home from the doctor,
Yeah.
what happens when they get home from the hospital. And it can be good, bad, and ugly. And everybody's got a
Yeah.
different set of circumstances, different degrees of support, both human and financial, to be able to navigate this next step. But as you mentioned, Kim, it's mostly people are reacting because they're in it before they're talking about it. And so that's basically my biggest tip, is starting the conversation. And it can be a little uncomfortable. It's sort of like you talk about making magic. I feel like that's my superpower. My magic is being able to sort of weave that conversation and bridge the gap between generations, understanding fully where the sandwich generation caregiver is like, what are we supposed to do with this woman? And so I think it's a family matter. So, but also honoring what boundaries people want around who's involved in certain conversations, because again, each circumstance looks different, but rarely are all the children on the same page and everybody's
Mm.
financially at the same point. And some are quite concerned about preserving an inheritance, others like want at that inheritance. It brings out sometimes the worst in people. And when I was nursing in Ottawa, I remember caring for an elderly lady, and in the next room the real estate agent was in there with the family, and I thought, like, could you
Yeah.
just give us a
Press
minute?
pause.
Yeah, like I understand why they need to know for decision making purposes. And so that's why I created the approach that I created, was getting ahead of it, having the conversations that are necessary so that you can live out your days with peace of mind, knowing we've got our stuff like sorted out. We know who's going to do what, that people feel really confident with whatever decisions they need to make. And again, for many seniors, that involves considering long-term care options, which even before the pandemic, nobody wanted.
Right.
So,
So let's take a big step back.
mhm.
Okay. So for the first thing, I'm familiar with the term sandwich generation, but I don't know if everyone listening is familiar with that term. So just define what sandwich generation is.
Sure. So sandwich generation is that family who have aging parents, children who still need their attention or support, professional demands of their own, typically household demands of their own and everything in between. And now, you know, so they're sort of stuck between two generations. We say like sandwich generation, like the elderly people and the children are the bread, and we're in the middle, where
Right.
there's an awful lot of responsibilities on our plates at the same time. And while I don't like to, I just feel it's also very much a women's issue. Typically, that's
Oh,
not to say there aren't
1000%.
plenty of male caregivers or people who find themselves in the role. And I think at the end of the day, when I talk about sandwich generation, it's like we knew it was coming, but we didn't
Just
really
know
ask for
when.
all the roles. Like, we didn't
Right.
really ask to be responsible for everything everyone eats forever. But
Right.
most women, that's the responsibility they take in their household. Now they got to worry about what mom and dad are eating too.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's sort of that you're in the middle and you love all the people. Like you love the bread. You don't
Right.
want to be, you want everybody to have the best possible care, but where does that leave us, right? It's
Right.
exhausting, overwhelming, and can be really, stressful for people.
Right. And so, as I interpret it, as you're saying, you're dealing with, your parents, but you're also dealing with children. This isn't small children necessarily. This could be your 20-something-year-old kid still in college, or your 30-something-year-old kid who still has whatever needs they have of you as a parent. So
Of
it's
course.
not just
And
the,
even grandchildren, like some
right,
people have grandchildren at a fairly young age. I mean,
right.
there's just all the people around you need you on both
Right.
sides.
There's just kind of like this constant circle of, can you, or
Yeah.
I feel I
And
should.
who's got us, right? Like
Right.
who's asking how we're doing, you know what I mean? So
Right.
it just, I think it's a really global issue. I think there's a lot of people who, if it's not happened yet, I mean, and also I always remind people, aging is great news. Like we're not asking for a
Yeah.
different outcome, but to stay in front of it so that when you're making decisions, you already know. Again, if you find out that an aging parent's running out of money, you'd probably rather know that sooner than later, even though it would
Right.
be ideal if it wasn't the situation. We want to be able to, make decisions with confidence as far as, especially remaining in the home is sort of where my passion lies, helping
Yeah.
people remain in the family home. And, you mentioned being back for Christmas, and you see not just the person aging, but the home, right? Like you see
Right.
the dwelling itself.
Oh,
And
yeah.
for a lot of people, that becomes a burden to the point where they feel they need to sell and move. We like to suggest that there's an awful lot of support you could bring in and around to avoid that move, for people so that they feel like they're enjoying their home and not burdened by it.
All right. So, all right. Like, how do I bring it back? There's like 3 roads that we can go through. So let's take the first road. So the first road is that, you know, many of us are like, my parents, they're pretty young. They're pretty with it. They, should we even be having this conversation? When do you kind of start to broach the conversation of what do you want? God forbid,
Mhm.
there's some illness, there's, memory loss or whatever. When do you start to have that conversation of like, how do you want, your last days, if you will, to be?
Mhm. I think the approach we take really is really getting to know the person's story and circumstances. And obviously, when you're in that family, you've got a decent idea of, all the things that might have to be factored in. But that's part of what creates the overwhelm, is so much, right?
So is it
Um,
just sitting, it's sitting down and saying like, hey, mom and dad, like, you're healthy, life's good,
mhm.
but at some point, life isn't going to be as rosy as it is right now.
Yeah, I think sometimes sharing a story of like, my friend from work, this happened and they needed to decide things in a hurry. And I don't want us to ever be in that position.
Right.
Making it about you, I
Mm-hmm.
think like you want it because you want to honor their wishes. And
Right.
should something happen again, like somebody could just have a stroke and be nonverbal and not really able to communicate the way they could before. I mean, obviously,
Right.
like there's other faculties we can use, but I just feel like starting the conversation sometimes can be easiest when we say, look, I was thinking about my own future and the things that I, would like to do. So finding, an ease of broaching that subject. I mean, obviously, when you start to notice issues like memory loss that are impacting safety, of course, you can't prolong that conversation. Like the safety element is really of utmost importance. But again, there's lots of things that we can do, to give people peace of mind. We don't want to worry them with all the doom and gloom of what might be down the
Right.
road, but rather to take sort of that unique map and help people see what supports they already have that they may not have thought about,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the things that where we could foresee they might want to start to consider how they would fill that gap should things go that way, but
Right.
then get on with living and elevating their own well-being so that they're aging well. So we're not just in a process of like taking people and then saying, okay, good luck with that. I mean, to
Right,
me, if I'm doing my job well, it's right to end of life. If I'm providing great value, people want me always in there, in sort of overseeing the household and in their corner to guide and advise based on whatever circumstances come down the road. And I think that's, even getting, for me, one of the primary things I've worked with clients for that can be a burden that we don't always talk about, not just health, but the stuff, right? Like our parents' homes
yeah,
are full of stuff. And so that preparing the house to sell it if they needed to in a hurry, again, it's not something you want to have to find out in the middle of a crisis. Now we have to list mom's house and it wasn't ready. Like,
right. We have 30 years of crap to get rid of.
right. And they don't want to leave that. And they probably
Right,
really don't want us digging through it either, but they do recognize that they're going to need some help with this.
right.
And they don't want to leave it behind for someone else to clean up later. Most are that's a big stress for a senior,
Yeah,
is
a lot of
what's going to happen to
stress.
all my stuff. And is this going to be a big problem for my kids? And that's if people have local children. Not everybody lives local to their parent either, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's take a step back. So, we talked about like, just broaching the conversation with your parents about like, how would they like to see their life play out? The second place is, if they do say, you talked about the house. And so, some people are kind of, I don't know if the word smart is, I don't know what the right word is, but they kind of foresee, they're like, you know what, we live in this big old house and going up and down all these damn stairs and into the
Yeah.
basement just isn't how I want to see it. And they want to sell. That's great. But what if you kind of, you look at your parents and you're like, why are they, going up and, going in the basement to do laundry and
Mhm.
lugging things up and down 500 flights of stairs? Is that a conversation to start to have with your parent? Because, you just might be, you talk about safety, you might be like, are they going up and down the stairs in the middle of the night and
Yeah.
tripping or whatever? Is that
Right.
a conversation? If you, as a child, you feel like, you know what, I don't feel safe with my parents in this house.
Mhm. And that's if that's the case for people, that's the brilliant, like, kind of entry into the conversation where, and again, with age-wise groups, so again, I've mentioned I've been in nursing 25 years, 26 years in the community. And I've also been a real estate agent for 15. So I've done a lot of property management and real estate valuations. And so helping people explore other options, including what to do with the property. So for example, if they just love that house and they can add some assistive devices or equipment or things like that, that allow them to stay there and know that even if they end up implementing some of those things and there's still safety concerns or issues, at least you can say you tried. I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people pull the plug too quickly. Oh, that was the wrong
Gotcha.
expression to use. But I think a lot of people, they give up on the idea of keeping an aging loved one in the home for all the reasons that are actually remediatable, as far as putting in a small ramp, adding some handrails or a stair lift, or even some other simple things about changing furniture around, that a senior has always seen it that way, to move something that would prevent a fall. So this is all part of what we do when we do an analysis for a family. Is we look at the property and the people, and we make sure that there's still a way to keep that a good fit.
Gotcha.
Um,
So, for someone, so for, if I choose, like, this is my house and I'm gonna stay here forever, or as forever, for whatever forever looks like for you, it's maybe bringing in professionals like yourself and saying, okay, mom and dad want to stay here. What can we do to make this a more livable environment for them?
Yes, exactly. And I think the other thing too, that is, again, as you said, there was 3 roads we could take. And I always, as I've been sort of launching this brand, it's like there are sort of things we do. We take care of the people, we help with the property, but we also help them figure out how can they make that happen with whatever their financial picture looks like, whatever their existing resources are, to be able to, again, make those changes if needed. And then guide to the next step as appropriate. So it's like this kind of ongoing guidance. And in my nursing life, I've shared end of life with many, many, many families. And I think there is something so peaceful about passing away in your own home. For some people, they may not, they can't even bear to think about that. This is a regular conversation in my world. So,
Right.
the idea of needing to make some kind of a transition into like an end of life facility, like a hospice, or something like that, is always possible. But again, we're seeing a lot more growth in this industry of people that are there to support, to help elderly loved ones remain in their home, but also to make sure that in so doing, we're being an excellent steward of their resources. Because so for example, I'm Canadian, and here our healthcare dollars cover our healthcare. So when, you know, like a lot of what's required might be covered through tax dollars, but there's an awful lot of stuff that's not available through that coverage. And here there's really no there's not a lot of privatization or systems in place, but the approach really being largely around conveying a light and airy conversation about all of this, even though it might seem like a heavy thing to talk about, that people
Right.
feel like, again, leave kind of feeling like light as a feather. There's a feather in the AgeWise logo, actually, because that is a symbol to me. It's a bit of a long story. I don't know how long we have, but the idea of putting your hand up for help, and you don't have to wait till you're drowning to put your hand up for help, to speak up. So to me, the feather is like a bird. Like, nobody ever begrudges the song of a bird. You're not being a bother by using your voice to say, I've been thinking a lot. I'm starting to feel overwhelmed about what's going to happen when I'm gone, whether that comes from an aging parent and you knowing, you know, ideally your listeners knowing that we're available to kind of take it from there and help at least guide to the next step and see if there's a fit for us to serve families working together, because we know there's not one cookie cutter solution to any of it. And that's
Yeah.
part of what makes it really tricky.
Oh, like, you know, as it's kind of like you're, you know, talking through is, you know, part of it is like, okay, you know, where do they live, right? So that's number one, like, where do they live? The second part is, do, you know, if their mind is made, what if they're say to you, you know, I want to live with you, right? So I always kind of say to people, you need to have that like discussion.
Yes.
And there's,
Oh, this is such a fun, it's so interesting that you bring this up this way. Actually, just yesterday, assisted my family. Like, I have a twin sister and she lives in the same hometown as my parents are still there. I moved away. But her in-laws are also there. And so they've actually just both decided to purchase a property together, sell their two properties, and create something multi-generational, which I think where that's a fit is wonderful. But I'll tell you what, if it was the other side of the family, it wouldn't have been as easy to decide, yeah, we'll move in with mom and dad, because the relationships are different, right?
yeah,
So if, again, but that is an option for people. And I think there's certainly many cultures, I would say in North America, not so much, but in many
yes.
cultures, you know, there's no, what do you
There's
mean,
not
who's going to
even,
take it? Like, it's just
there's
an
not even,
obligation. It's
right,
part of
there's
the
not
life
even a
cycle.
thought, there's not even a conversation, like, if I'm unable to live by myself, of course, if I'm not living with you, I might be living with your sister or your brother or whatever, but like, one of you are taking me in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, and also guiding through boundaries around that, what care can be provided to help that elderly loved one maintain as much independence as possible, which is best for all, right? It's,
Right,
as the caregiver, you're happy to preserve the independence, and it gives that, you know, the senior this sense of confidence when they can still do some of those little things. There's already things that most let go of over time, whether that be somebody always loved to tend their garden and now it looks like
yeah,
hell in the backyard. I really believe that part of what we do with AgeWise is connect people. So somebody is going to tend that garden so he can look from the window
outside and
and
see
it
it,
makes him
yeah,
feel alive.
yeah,
Eating that tomato out of his own garden is something that's like, these are the meaningful things. It's not just about, are you getting a shower often enough? And,
right,
you know, are you going to fall? Those are obviously important things, but it's not the only things
right,
that
it's
can
just,
really help people bring more joy and ease to the remaining chapters and really get clear about what things would they love to see. I'll happily share with you, and you can put it in show notes. I have this journal prompt worksheet that, again, it would be maybe a great way for someone to print it and give it to an aging parent just to get the conversation rolling. And then, you know, if they feel like carrying on the conversation, they can book a call with me or whatever. But it's just to kind of get those juices flowing and really start to sit with, if anything were possible, what would I really want? How would I want this to play out? Would I still like to travel more? Would I still like to, you know, just socially to be more engaged in groups or those kinds of things? Like, how can we connect people to things that fit their needs, budget, and lifestyle, while being a really good steward of the resources? The thing is, so many seniors on fixed incomes, they're thinking what they have is all they'll ever have, right? What they have is, that's it. They've worked their whole life for it. So they are very protective, and understandably so. They need to be, especially, you know, when we look at changes in the economy recently have really hit seniors hard, because
yeah,
being on a fixed income, you don't anticipate a big jump in cost of living, and it can be really fearful for people. So these are all, while there can be uncomfortable topics, these are all great reasons and segues into, we should probably talk about this. We should probably, have a conversation. Let's get an expert. We don't want to drag this out. I'm not asking for decisions today, but let's get some people who know what they're doing with this to help guide our families so that we can, all feel better about what's going to come down the road.
And I absolutely I love this, having that kind of like that family meeting for not only for, I'd say, like end of life things, like, okay, at the end of your life, any heroic measures or anything like that, and having those conversations ahead of time, as sad as that might be, it's definitely, given some of the recent things in my life, it had just made it so much less stressful for the children. That
100%. And that really, that's when you think the end goal in mind is that everyone can make decisions with confidence moving forward. Even like a lot of, again, sandwich generation people have a difficult time even booking a vacation because
yeah,
they're worried about an aging parent at home. And so getting those people surrounded with so we can do this with confidence and know that you're looked after. Like, it's just to be proactive in the conversation, I think, is really key, and know that, again, it doesn't need to be difficult. It doesn't need to be harder. Of course, it feels a little sad to, even ideate around what's it going to be like when we're
right,
not going back to that. And I think even the holidays, like you said, like, was that our last Christmas in the house?
right.
Like, if you call your mother and say, I can't stop thinking about this since Christmas, like, what if it was, I just recent events, or, you put the onus kind of on, like, this is weighing
Right,
on me a little bit.
it's in my
I
heart
can
right
only
now.
imagine that you
Right,
might want to talk about it, but don't know how to bring it up. So I'm just
right.
suggesting that maybe we could decide to, make this the year that we have the conversations.
Yeah, and just, kind of get everything in order, because it's like like anything, it always happens is that 4 a.m. phone call that you're like, oh crap, like what if mom or dad wanted?
Mhm.
And then, like you said, if you have a sister, you and your sister, you might be on the same page, but or you might let's say throw in a third sibling, and
Mhm.
now all of a sudden you're trying to be like, are you pushing that sibling out because they're not in sync with you and the other sibling? So it's
Right. So the way I tackle that is, when I start with a client, like, I consider my client to be whoever called. If it's the adult child who's trying to seek options for an aging parent, then we discuss that. Getting the aging parent on board with having the conversations. To me, at that point, there's a decision made by the senior who they want involved in these conversations. There
yeah,
might be lots of who knows what water's under the bridge, or maybe it hasn't made all the way to the bridge, where they don't want to bring somebody in for a financial reason or some other reason. But that they alone get to decide who's party to the conversations. And we make sure, basically, by the time they're done with us, if they work with us sort of through the entire approach, we've taken a fresh look at all the financial options. We've taken a fresh look at the will or any powers of attorney, and people understanding what the role is, why you would choose somebody, but doing it in such a way where we're really, again, taking into account that maybe two people need to do it in cooperation, or for a lot of families, they could just hire a trustee to manage it and the kids never need to know. So it's just helping people see what the options are that are best for them. And then knowing, based on their unique circumstances, that there's somebody out there in the world who knows them, knows the household, knows the family, and then can, as the story unfolds, direct to decisions based on all the players involved and the story behind your family and the dynamic, without it being intrusive, just kind of creating a situation that then it's much easier to move forward from there.
yeah, because it's, I literally lived down the street from a family who had this huge old house, and the parents have been deceased for, I'd say, several years now, and the siblings are squabbling what to do with the house.
Mhm.
And and you see it and you feel sad, because you're just like, I'm sure the parents are like, this is not what I ever wanted,
Yeah, no, of course. Of
for there
course.
to be this such a, like, it's like so divisive that, this one kid is like, this was our house. And it's really hard, because it's like
Mhm.
you feel for that sibling, but at the same time the rest of them are like, we just want this done.
Yeah, no, so even, like, again, this is so timely, but yesterday I was literally at a table with a family who are grieving the loss of their mother. I don't know what their relationship is to their realtor, but I was sitting there representing my client as a realtor, and extended to them, like, this is a really emotional time to be grieving the loss of somebody, and now you're dealing with the family home. And they all wept. They'd swung the hammer when they built the house. Like, and so some people are less attached. So
Right.
you're right. Once there's a number of people involved, It can sometimes muddy the waters for sure.
Oh,
But
yeah.
again, like, for example, with that family, I would say, okay, if one particular kid really wants the house, what can they do to buy the others out then? Decide on a price, he can keep it, he buys them out, so they've got their money out, he can hold the property and continue to, pay down the mortgage or whatever is required, right? But again, people, it's hard to see when you're in it,
Yeah,
especially when you factor in all the dynamics. And so having sort of a neutral party to guide that isn't just a real estate agent with something to gain on the sale, or isn't
right.
just a home care provider, like for example, for people that are still in the home, who that's going to be profiting off the work that's provided, and they see it as a possible client, but like to take a look from the family's best interest and the
Right.
seniors sort of wishes as the primary guidepost to what goes on from here.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I feel that because we're guided in so many other ways. Like I know how to file my taxes, I know how to open a bank account, but there hasn't been a conversation around how do I get myself prepared for the next step. And I don't know if it's because it's just not something anyone wants to think about. No one wants to think about their own mortality, right? But also,
True.
if you think about it, most people, the average people weren't living into their 80s and 90s.
No, absolutely. And it's again, another great segue, Kim. So with age-wise, with the approach of the senior care consulting piece of what we do is like kind of that's where I feel in my heart that this is like the work I was meant to do on the planet. So I feel I really want to serve as many families as possible, because it's not just the senior who benefits, it's their adult children. Everyone else in the scenario, clear is kind at a certain point. It's like we know what the situation is. But once we've got those basic fears met, or fears sort of alleviated and the needs met, we believe it creates space to elevate their well-being. And we have a whole framework, and I'll share that with your audience too, if you'd like, where it's basically like, so for us, I don't know how old you are, Kim, I'm 47 years old. I have been, mindful about, like, of course, if you Google anti-aging, what comes up, right? It's not end of life care that comes up.
No,
It's
it's like
like,
what
you
wrinkle
got
creams
wrinkles, or
and yeah.
yeah. And yet, so part of what feeling our best is being at our elevated well-being. And so I have an entire framework around helping ideally people start to think about this stuff in their 40s, never mind their 70s, so that they're
Right.
really building the life that they want, not just, hoping that what they did is enough in the end, right? Like hoping they don't outlive their money, for example. That's an awful thing
Yeah.
to say. But again, this is the fear people have
Oh, for
with the cost of
sure.
living going up and their health declining. They're thinking, oh, but maybe they're still quite well, but they're not sure if they kind of swung and missed at retirement and they don't have enough. So we're trying to help people tend to their financial well-being, like explore options to do better with investments and those kinds of things. So without changing anything, just guiding people to options that might be something they hadn't considered before. Like, for example, somebody has a really poorly performing asset, and you have, and a financial advisor could direct them to something that would be more beneficial for them. At least they know. That doesn't mean they have to do anything about it. They can keep the money parked where it is, even if it's poorly performing. Like, that's the decision of the person who has to sign, right? But it's a matter of putting before this person their options. And as well, like I know for myself too, I've been, while full-time employed as a nurse, I've also been in entrepreneurship. And when you look at retirement planning and the life that I want to lead in retirement, I always say, Kim, give your old lady self a name. Like, what's she going to love? What's she going to
Yeah.
want? You need to know who she's going to be, and what is she going to be? A bit of a homebody? Will she be more like of a kind of a free
Traveling
spirit and
here and
and
there.
soul?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
what lights you up, and getting people thinking about that and giving them permission to even just use their imagination. So in the well-being framework, for example, the first thing that we encourage people to do is turn off the news. Use your
Mm.
imagination for good things. Don't consume news media that's fearful. And pretty much all news media is. But I would say our most loyal audience in front of news media are seniors.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they live their day by it. Like meds at 10, news at noon,
Right.
nap at 2, dinner at 5,
Right.
news
News at
at
6.
7,
Yeah.
bent up, whatever. Like, and it becomes such a part of the routine that I think it's actually detrimental to their well-being to be consuming negative news media. There's no way it's not raking over subconscious fears from even generations past. And there's studies that show fear is passed forward in our DNA. And you can't go to any culture, any country, anywhere where there isn't some kind of trauma within generations, whether
Oh
it's a
God,
tragic
yeah.
loss of a loved one, or God only knows, right? It could be genocide, you name it.
Yeah.
And we don't need to consume more of it. So that's like something I don't always get through to them, but I always beg, give yourself a break from it and see if you feel better.
Yeah.
And if you don't, well, you tried. And if you do, give it another day. And maybe watch just on Wednesdays or every other day. Like any amount, it's like smoking. Any amount fewer cigarettes that you smoke is probably better for your health,
For
right?
sure.
I mean, we know that. So I believe news media. Now I'm not I don't have like, governor, like, surgeon general's warnings or anything, but I believe that the well-being of our it's negatively impacted by their consumption of news media. And I think that when we can give them something else to do. So I'm building an app as well with AgeWise that where people can come, it'll be like a community, it's like a center for people to connect. Again, many people are at home and don't have a choice, or are home with an elderly loved one and still could get out, but kind of can't. And so being able to connect people who are, for whatever
Yeah.
reason, bound to a community that lights them up and that gives them a sense of belonging and well-being, and breathes life over their remaining chapters, instead of like just kind of Groundhog Day, like just the next, every day being like the next, and looking forward to outings for appointments, giving people an opportunity to thrive instead of just surviving at home.
So you said something that was that I think it's very interesting. So right now we're talking about, I have, I'm an aging person and I have children. What about I feel like the generation that we're in right now, a lot of people opted not to have children. So
You're
what
right.
happens to them?
Yeah, this is just it. I often think, you could have all the finances in the world and no human resources. I mean, people can look at, for example, we've explored hiring like live-in caregivers, like a nanny sort of thing, but like
Yeah.
somebody to be a living caregiver, so somebody has round the clock companionship. But obviously it can definitely add an element of, and yet usually by the time that person reaches an old age, they're really independent. Like one of the ladies that I just dealt with, she'd been divorced and she was just crushing things that would like cripple other elderly people that I know, because she was prepared. She had that she had some independence. And so I think you're right. There's definitely going to be sort of like certainly I'm sure a higher percentage of women who elected never to have children, who maybe won't have those caregivers down the road. I guess it's not like that I'm sure was a part of a consideration when they made the choice. And those people would be limited to, again, just building relationships, because at the end of the day, we have a concept as well inside of AgeWise called whanau. It's spelled WHANAU. There's one like an accent, and it's a concept, basically means it's a Maori term for family or extended family. So where you don't have blood relationships, it's a really good idea to start early bolstering relationships, so that when you need to ask for help, it doesn't feel weird. Because there's a lot of
Gotcha.
people, well, they've never asked for anything, so now to ask feels weird. If you're building relationships and have rapport, and part of our process is helping people establish who that is for them. It might not be my sister, but my neighbor is welcome. You know what I
Gotcha.
mean? It just depends on the dynamics in the family. So helping people feel like, they're more supported than maybe they realize, ideally, is the goal. We don't want to work with people where they're like, oh God, this looks, the forecast is gloomy. We want to make sure that people feel that, that there are bright days ahead, and that they don't need to be fearful, and that whatever comes down the road, we will help them figure it out, whatever that looks like.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of people as well looking at things like chip mortgages, or from a financial perspective. We encourage people to really understand and make sure we're guiding them through understanding what the options are, as far as what fees are associated. So they may still decide to go ahead with something. It's always up to them, but they at least understand all of the alternatives, not just what they saw on TV with Tom Selleck, and I think it was someone else advertising the chip mortgage. We want to make sure people are, again, if that's a good decision, it may be for some. I would argue that there's probably other options for people that if they explored, they might choose a different option. I would say there's certainly a percentage of the population who might say, nope, this is good enough for me, and they're content if they really understand it and they're not getting, talked into it by a broker. That's part of what we aspire to do for the families we serve, is kind of take that fear about getting scammed out of there. Like, know that whatever decision mom's getting into, whatever service contract agreements, whatever they're getting involved with over time to bring care in, for example, that people are billing fairly and not taking advantage of a senior, because that's a big fear as well. They'd rather do nothing because that's safer.
True.
But is it?
It's funny that you talk about Tom Selleck, because you're right. If you think about it, especially the generation that ad is targeting, he was the man.
Oh yeah.
you know,
It's funny as I get older, like now I'm like, yeah, he kind of is the man. It's like Kevin Costner. I watch Yellowstone and I'm like, okay, yeah, he's a pretty, he's a good looking old dude. And yet when I was watching Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, he was just a child and so was I, right? But we're
right.
all aging and it's like, it's a beautiful thing. And when people can embrace the beautiful life they've built, really believe that the best is yet to come, and to help people breathe life over the possibilities of what's left, and joy in the conversations. And when again, helping that burden of care, and it's like, it sounds like a harsh, but it is a burden of care. There's a
It
reason
is.
that term exists, right? Women are having to take time away from work. It's affecting their marriage because they constantly have to be running around, or it's their mother-in-law that they're dealing with. So it's affecting their marriage because they're like, this is your
Mm-hmm.
mom. I mean, these are the real stresses. These are the real conversations that are happening in the households of families that are in it. And you're right, when you open the show saying, when we're reacting from a crisis point, we're not making good decisions, because the blood literally goes from our brain to our legs so we could outrun the problem, which we can't, if only, and to our jaw so we could bite our way out of the problem, because we've evolved from that. And that stress response, when we can avoid making decisions in a stress response, obviously is always superior thinking.
Well,
So
like if we were to flash back, I think of, instances of in my own circle of things that have happened to my friends' families, where all of a sudden you get the phone call and, so and so has had a catastrophic accident, and they either didn't make it or you need to make a decision right now. Like they're on the phone and they're asking you what to do. And you're just like, holy shit, we've never
yeah.
talked about this. Or
Mhm.
you live in, my parents live in Florida. I live in Boston. Like, so now all of a sudden I'm a 4-hour plane ride away and I have to make a decision that they can't wait for me to get there
Mhm.
to make that
Yeah,
conversation.
I mean,
So
of course, like my heart races at the thought of it, just because nobody ever wants to be in the situation. I think at the end of the day, that's part of why I'm always promoting for people to like just start the conversation. And if I can help, let me know. People have gotten through things on their own since the beginning of time, but I can't tell you how many times I've shared what I do. And the caregiver, someone who's been through it, is like, where were you when I was going through this? Like the value of having somebody to just help you, like, yep, that's the best decision. Or
right,
like, let's talk about this, with all the expertise that I bring to the table from real estate, from nursing, about what do we do with the house? What do we do with my mom?
right. Or
What,
all the various questions that you need to ask yourself, all
mhm.
the very like, all the damn forms.
Yeah. Oh, geez. And also we aspire to also help people find supports they didn't know were out there. Like,
Right.
I really believe we're more supported than we think, and being able to just add value. And what I can say is, as the testimonials begin rolling in here for me, like people feel cared for. And that
Yes.
even the caregiver is allowed to feel cared for. It's not that they have to be giving the care. Somebody's guiding their caregiving journey so that they know. Like I've had conversations with families as well. And while it sounds difficult, it rolled off my tongue. One of my clients, and I said to her husband, if this was my mother, I would beg you to stop. Stop rushing her back to the hospital. Stop with the next surgery. She's
Hmm.
like, I can see with my eyes, she's dying. Like,
Right.
and whether that's active or not, it's like this running back and forth is not the solution. The
Right.
doctor wants to see you, the surgeon wants to cut. But what's
Right.
best for this person?
And
Right?
it's
What's
fun. And I love that conversation, because if this your client had the conversation with his mom,
Mhm.
and before all of this, you're in that circle, before that happened, you in your mind, you're like, I'm doing what's best for her.
Mhm.
But if you before you got to that stage and you said, okay, if we got to the stage where they're not sure if this next procedure, pill, whatever, is going to, dramatically extend your life,
Or
do
improve it, because
improve
extending a life of being bedridden and rush
improve it,
back and
right?
forth to
And
the hospital, like,
making you like better, or as
mhm,
as best you can be, or do you just want to be like, you know what, I'm good. Like, let's
let's keep you
just
comfortable. Like, what would you like to do? And some people are on a laundry list of medications that they might feel better if they were off, but the doctor said take them, so there's
right. So
one you
next thing you're just
follow.
pumping them full of pills just because the doctor said so. And
And yeah, and we all know, like, you don't have to go too far for documentaries to find out about pharmaceuticals and that kind of thing. So the other thing that's kind of interesting about age wise, and again, part of how I direct people around problem solving and managing the situation, is always we want to help people run their homes more sustainably. And so sustainable caregiving being like, you can get up and do it the next day because you're not exhausted, right?
Right, exactly.
Sustainability around the home, like reducing waste and running the home so that it doesn't need to be like, so that everybody's comfortable, but you're managing expenses. That's again, financial sustainability for somebody on a fixed income. You know, we want to be able to really take good care of people and planet and what's best, like you said, for people. So, you know, part of what I like directing people to, and again, now here, this is a really prudent thing. All of a sudden in Canada, it's legal to use cannabis. For many years, it
Right.
wasn't. And so a lot of senior hands are going up. They're like, I'm
Mhm.
interested in try because now that it's legal, they feel like they maybe can. They've been on a medication for years that maybe they would have never needed if they'd known about it. And so just trying to, again, guide that conversation and sort of open the floor for people who maybe have other issues. Even intimacy in old age is an issue that is, we all laugh about it, but it's funny. Like I went to see a 91-year-old client just to let him know what I do and that I'm out there. And all he could talk about was my sexy legs. And I was like, okay, like didn't expect that from the 91.
So next time I come here, wear
Um,
pants.
Yeah, no kidding. But it was just, it's all a part of us as human beings that's important. Feeling loved and intimacy, like that's something that I think, again, people just have this idea that they have to let go of
Mm,
their intimate life or their home or these other things, their mobility as they age. And we're just here to kind of come around all of it with really real life conversations to say, you can still do, if you're still like somebody who's got a desire and the mechanics to be able to be intimate with people, like have at her, right? We want to make sure people are feeling fulfilled and inviting in the conversations. Maybe they would do something about what, regardless of what that ailment is. Even for some people with hair loss, again, we're getting back a little bit to the vanity matrix, but if some, or metrics, but if somebody would feel better with a few of these things more a part of their life,
oh, yeah.
then that's what we're all about. And it's going to look different for everybody. I was actually, this is maybe a topic for a whole other episode, but I was shocked. A few months ago, I went into long-term care and was there for a man who had had full surgery for transition from male to female in his 80s.
Mm, yeah.
Like that guy's got some pretty, I'm sure, amazing stories to share about his journey and to go to all, like it just, it completely blew me away. But again, each person has their own unique beliefs, set of circumstances. Another thing that's come up, just sort of from an ethics perspective with regard to like end of life care, we've also legalized for certain conditions the medical assistance in dying, so people can opt for that. And that's obviously it has a big impact on the family because it's not, again, about the person who's saying, I'm done, I'm not going to get better. They're trying to sort of make their exit on this from this world on their own terms. And there's a lot of empowerment in it and comfort for the family in many, many ways. But there could be somebody who, like, their religious beliefs forbid them to agree with it. And now they're grieving not only the person, but now so there's a lot. And these things can get really, really layered. I mean, for many families, it can be simple enough. Again, people have managed in one way or another for years, but just the conversation can go in so many different ways.
Yeah, you're right. And, I guess as people are, listening to this and I feel like we've presented so many different scenarios to start driving that conversation. You've also presented different scenarios that, yeah, with a few improvements, your parents could potentially, live out their days in their current home. We've presented opportunities for if you don't live in the same state, town, hell, country, things that you can start to, find that neighbor or start to find those support for your parents and kind of start to ask yourself, maybe do you move there? Maybe do they move closer to you so that, you don't feel like I'm a 4-hour flight away from mom or dad and, you want to be a little bit closer. But I like how you kind of work with the family and kind of say, I am going to give you the poo-poo platter of options.
Mhm.
And you just can decide
Yeah.
as a family where this goes, but you also provide resources. And I think that's what most people don't know. Like that if I'm on Instagram, that's going to pop up on my Instagram. That's not going to pop, like,
Yeah, totally.
I don't even know how to Google search that.
Yeah, I know to give people their unique options really, and people say, well, how would you help my family? Well, I would need to know a little more about your family, but I
Right.
believe that I could add value to any family. And in part, again, say you're at a distance and you're on purpose with our guidance, putting a play up, you know, the people in place, help know that person saying yes to being a support of any kind might feel a lot more inclined to say yes if they knew they have guidance. They're not going to be now required to make the decisions. They're just, someone's going to be guiding it. They just might need to be the hands on deck, for example, or like the local contact too, you know, and that it's so people know exactly what they're signing up for, agreeing to by being involved in the care of somebody. And again, these, I really believe as well that there's a lot to be said for finding the match where people want to remain involved with that family until the end of life. So it's
Yeah.
not like you're always looking for new help. And so, because that can be really stressful for families too. They've tried a couple of different agencies, maybe a different caregiver shows up each time. In some
Yeah.
cases, hearing loss and a language barrier can be a huge barrier to care. So we actually work as well with healthcare providers and professionals so that they can communicate effectively with their client, whether it means like helping them with words where their accent is really thick and helping them learn to say that word without it, because it's more comfortable for everyone. It's not about taking someone's accent away, because their accent is beautiful, but in somebody's conveyance of how they want a towel folded in their home and somebody else is in their
Yeah.
home like, folding their undies, like so it's just, it becomes like it's a really intimate thing. So you want to try to, as much as possible, soften any barriers to help a relationship develop where people want to remain involved with each other and know that they're going to be expertly guided, so that they're not ever feeling like now the onus is on them for.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the family seeing, the other thing we offer is just even offering a financial statement to the family to say, okay, we've brought some services in to help my mom. At this point, it's looking sort of comparable to the cost of long-term care. Are we still good with the commitment to keep mom in the home? Like, let's
Right.
reevaluate the situation. And then, you know, at that point, I still think there's it's hard to put a dollar value on remaining in your home. Like, I think we can all
It
agree on.
is. Yeah.
But when you look at the cost of long-term care, and in a lot of cases in long-term care, people still require additional service. So what they're
and
getting
also,
for their like monthly fee is still, if they're incontinent, they still need more laundry done. And like, these are the realities of,
or, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but I know here, for my friends who have families in long-term care, it's like they still find a way to nickel and dime you, so
oh,
it's like, you want
yeah,
this.
and you know, it's so funny because I've been in long-term care facilities. I worked when I was a nursing student, I worked as a PSW or like a healthcare aide. I don't know exactly what you call them, personal support, giving baths and, you know, changing people, bringing them to the toilet, all that kind of stuff. And everybody who works there, I believe, is doing the best they can. The resources are so limited.
Oh, so limited.
And when I actually, I think it was about 6 years ago now, I sold my neighbor's house. They were an elderly couple. When they moved in, that house was on a dirt road. Now it's a fairly busy street, but it wasn't when they moved there. And so I kept seeing her outside and she was starting to wander a bit. And so I reached out to the daughter and ended up finding them a place to rent. But when they were looking at the cost of long-term care versus staying in the home, like I always tell families, if for less than the cost of a couple of months in long-term care, we could work together to create something so you never have to go there.
Yeah.
That is, you know, so, and that, you know, when I worked with that family, it was kind of when the idea for Age-Wise Group, and then the pandemic set in, you know, beyond that, where we saw the impact of isolation on seniors and how
Oh,
stretched our
yes.
resources already are, especially with our government funded healthcare. Like, I know from old lady Leslie, she's going to want more than what the government says I'm allowed to have.
Oh, God, yeah. Old lady Kim for sure is going to tell the government, you live on that.
Yeah,
live on that
exactly.
for a week and then tell me if you can do it.
Yeah. So, and you know, the other thing too, and I don't know what things are like in the States, but another thing that people are sometimes unaware of until like happy 65th birthday. If you've been on disability for any period of time, your benefits go away. Like if you're aging with a chronic illness or a disability at 65, you lose part of your income, as though it gets easier to be disabled as you're elderly.
Right.
But people, you know, it's an unfortunate reality. I don't make the rules. I'm not complaining. Like, I know that our decision makers and policy makers are really, like, I have to believe in my heart they're doing the best they can. I don't want to be a lobbyist or get involved in political campaigns about it. To me, I just want to take care of our seniors. They build the world we live in. They don't deserve to have, like, I believe that so deeply in my heart that, again, if we can, we'll pull out all the stops to keep someone in the home. And if they can't, we'll figure it out.
But you want to make people aware, it's like, I kind of feel like, here in the States, we always talk about get a 401k, there's no more pensions in the world, get a 401k so that when you do get to retire, you have money to live on. Yet no one kind of like, that 65-year mark. No one ever says, okay, so then what happens when you stop working? There's not that conversation. So then so that's one big pivotal conversation that we never have. The second big pivotal conversation is like end of life, like if I can't take care of myself, what do you do? And like you said, knowing until you have to go look at these long-term care facilities, you don't realize that that flat dollar amount that they say for the low price of only includes a roof over your head and a bed, not the like food and this.
It's
and you
not,
need
it's not concierge service, that's for sure. And I think it's at that point when I have, moved, or, somebody's made the decision to move into long-term care. If they've made that decision, I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, why did you do that? Like, obviously they made the decision.
Clearly it worked. It's the best decision for them, but you're like, okay, how do we make it now work for you?
That, it's your turn to be cared for. I just, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I know what level of care you're going to get. I hope you're not too disappointed, like in the back of my mind, because and again, that's not to say that they, they can't bring other resources and surround themselves with that. In some case, for example, in the case that just came to mind, who she's like, I feel like I've cared for everyone long enough and it's time for me to get cared for. And it's true, but like, you're hardly moving into an all-inclusive. Like you're not,
you're not moving to Sandals.
This isn't resort time, like at all. But again, trying to breathe life over what's remaining, regardless of what a family decides, but helping them again, make those decisions with confidence. Like I remember as well, and when I lived in Ottawa, working with the Jewish family who were like kind of astounded at the idea that they could keep him at home. And she still writes to me regularly to say,
that's nice.
Because like it changed everything for their family. They were able to really enjoy their remaining time with their loved one, because they weren't having to worry about parking and visiting hours and like restrictions potentially with visitors or whatever. They were all able to be there where they wanted, having a drink, playing the music they loved. Like, and it can be really a beautiful thing to surround people with in-home palliative care. I can tell you, I've got a choir of angels up there, Kim, from all the years of sharing that really special time with people. And I know nobody if you can sure there's plenty of books on the subject about the top regrets of the dying. I don't think I've ever had a family that regretted the decision to remain in their home, because it's just
and ideally, provided they don't, like, it's kind of like what we talked about earlier. There's a point where like, it just becomes too much, right? And so like, we all know, especially if they have some type of debilitating illness, like you all know that at some point, like what you're able to do or bring in is just not enough anymore.
I mean, I haven't seen it yet, really, to be honest. And with a few exceptions, for example, I had one young mom who was palliative, and she didn't want her daughter to be scared that she died at home. So moved her to a different facility for a death. And that was at the request of the family. Well, they kind of, in some ways they wanted to, they knew it was just like probably better this way. But in most cases, when the decision's made that a person is indeed actively dying, there's lots of support that can be brought in to make that very peaceful and comfortable for everyone, the client as well as their family, to make sure they're supported with. Again, there's certain medications that we administer to sort of sedate to a degree so that people aren't restless, because there's again, this is for people who've lived it, they know what I'm talking about. And I don't want to I don't want to bring people back to something that was maybe a little uncomfortable for them, but I can say that almost without exception, the people that I've been a part of any sort of death in the home has been among the most beautiful experiences of my life, to be honest. Like, it really is it's a beautiful thing to share with someone. And that sounds a little odd, but especially like when I meet someone and I know that's why I'm caring for them, the insights they share, the wisdom they share, nobody wants to talk about it, but here we are. And now, so they're almost feeling like, as the person who's dying, the need to comfort the family, like the family wants to comfort them, but they are feeling the need to comfort the family. And so having the right people in there involved, like we have in Canada, we call them like end of life doulas, or like very similar to a birth doula, where someone's there to provide the comforts, make sure that, that if there's any pain, that it's well managed. If there's any sort of difficulties with breathing, that they know what to do to keep things very peaceful and comfortable. It's really something.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Mhm.
So I always ask everyone that comes on my show, this has just been really informative and, I'm hoping that everyone who's listening here, one, opens the door to have that conversation with their parent. Um,
Mhm.
two, or even start to think about it for yourself, like what are the decisions that you want to make for yourself so that even if you have little ones or kids of an age that just can't really comprehend this, you can start to think about, all right, I want to make sure that my kids don't feel how I'm feeling right now. Um, but I always ask everyone who comes to my show, what's one thing that makes you feel magical?
This work does, to be honest. It feels like so many people receive value from making it a family matter, guiding through the difficult stuff. And it just, yeah, it feel like to be able to bridge that gap between generations, like you're saying, and convey to both you and, like you said, adult children, but to help families figure it out so that you're right. It's not just a matter of for the elderly parent, but as the adult child of an elderly parent, you know, getting it in place as well too, so that you're never leaving your child in this position,
Mm-hmm.
so that you're again staying even further ahead of it by approaching the remainder of your professional career, your how you view the world, how you view your health, how you really worry about, like, not about the economy in general, but about your own economy, not to worry about the health history that like some people say, oh, everyone in my family has died of cancer. Like, that doesn't have to be your story. So I
Right.
encourage people to like write their own story. So I love to help that magic of pen to paper. Again, the feather in our logo, also often we use it as a plume, where like it's
Mm,
important to put that down. And especially elderly people typically have beautiful handwriting because they didn't type their whole lives, right? So
right.
just really getting clear on beginning with that end in mind. What would that look like? And then, dialing it back to create on purpose the remaining chapters instead of just reacting to things as they go.
I love that. And so I know that you're in Canada, but as could someone from the US work with you as well?
Yes, yes. I think that's something that it's really exciting. And in our inside of AgeWise group, one of the common real mission of the brand is to take care of our own communities first. And obviously here it's a lot easier for me to do certain things, but I think as far as adding tremendous value and guiding families to help them wherever they are, figure out what that looks like for them and help them find those resources, oversee the relationship so that we know people are continuing to be satisfied with the relationship. I don't think there's any bounds of geography with that, to be honest. There might
Perfect.
be a learning curve as we go, and each sort of, insurance coverage versus, again, those unique circumstances,
Mm,
whatever's available from, like whatever medical insurance people have, but just I don't believe that geography really binds us at all, because it doesn't matter where you were born or where you're growing up. Aging is something
aging
we
is
all go
aging.
through. It's universal. It's a universal thing. Our bodies and organs work the same way. And when I love teaching people as well how their body works,
Mm.
it's amazing to me how many people spend their entire life in a body. They have no comprehension of what it
Oh,
does until it starts leaking. It's like bringing your car to the mechanic. It's like, I don't know, it's making a noise. Like suddenly, why is my pant leg wet? Is that normal? Like, no, that's not normal. But
right.
helping people understand and demystify the messages that their body's been trying to give to them, and aging people. I think there's a lot of unlearning with nutrition and things like that need to happen. People have been sort of like marketed into this very highly chemically based diet that
Yeah.
Whole Foods with a garden and shopping at the periphery of the grocery store is going to be the best for your health. Even if the other thing has like the Heart and Stroke Foundation thing on it, it's still not better for you than butter. But like, again, it's sort of an unlearning, but taking that at the pace and the willingness of and the openness to change that the families have, but helping people understand how to age wisely from, like, obviously this is our one and only body we're given. We want to make sure we're, tending to our well-being, nourishing our organs and our bodies, and like tending to our organs of elimination, making sure that we're really going to age optimally so that we can avoid a lot of what people worry about down the road. But the sooner we start that, the better. So I say it's never too soon to start this process and conversation. And by all means, like sometimes maybe for a family, going first is the way to start the conversation with the senior. Say, we just went through this approach. I'm feeling a lot of peace of mind. I'm feeling a lot more empowered about the future. I would love to invite you to do it too. So there's always ways, doesn't matter who goes first, but I like to sort of approach things from a household standpoint. So again, if I'm working with a household, I would charge for that household. And then, would definitely offer, like, if there's referrals or the adult children want to do this too, then like we can talk about how that would work as far as, pooling and resources, or, you know, offering maybe some special pricing on if there's multiple households involved, how can we make it be a really good steward of everyone's resources, make sure that we're still, you know, compensated for our work, but make sure that people are looked after and that their finances are looked after as well.
I absolutely love that. And you're right, there's, aging is aging. And so there's but so many different options, regardless of what country you live in. So it's great for you to be able to just kind of help people organize themselves. And so
Mhm.
that even if it's something like you're like, okay, you're gonna have to go do your homework on this, but at
Mhm.
least you're giving them the questions to ask.
It's
Versus,
actionable items. It's like criteria where, for example, I've seen a lot of people that get where an agency will come in and offer way more support than they really need and tell them that's like the minimum available package. Like, really, I think we can do better than that. I think we could create custom relationships, even again, whether you do the neighbor eats out of your garden and they clean your washrooms once a month. Like, I don't know, like these solutions can look really different than service agreements with invoices. But
yeah,
it's we really love to guide people and help them see all the value of. So if there is a cost, they see the value. So like, for
right.
example, in my opinion, when you're beyond the age of 70, you probably shouldn't clean your own toilet. Like they call those bathroom fixtures for a reason. Most falls happen there. If you take your head off the sink or the toilet and sink are going to win every time.
Yep.
And so like, even though you can still, should you?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
would your family feel value in maybe pooling resources to provide the services of a cleaning service once a month or something, just to get really in there and but not
Right,
overdo it. Like some people you could eat off the floors, other people, like I've seen it all from hoarding to everything.
right. But you're also thinking to yourself, like, water, water on the floor, like that's just like your a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. And you know what? You did it already for how many years?
Right,
Some young person who has a cleaning business is trying to feed their family.
right.
So if we employ that person, I help, ideally, this is another one I feel like a little bit of a magical, and sometimes I'm questioning my magic on this, depending on the day, but helping empower seniors to let go of the purse strings a little bit and see value in
Yeah,
okay to spend on yourself, because most are sitting there worried about preserving an inheritance, which to me is
yeah.
baffling. Like I,
No,
I
you're
mean, I hope
you're
to have a very strong financial picture so my kids never need to worry about me financially in my future. But I'll tell you what, I want to take care of me and I want to model that for my kids so
but
that they don't, not do that for themselves one day. And again, I see this so clearly because my parents are this example. My dad's 70 and cleaning the toilet. My mom's chain smoking out at the back. And I'm not saying this out of disrespect.
no,
This is
you're
the
just
life that they live, right?
yeah, oh, yeah,
They've
I
spent, and they have that financial fear of they spent their whole life accumulating it. And oh my gosh, they don't know what the future holds. So you better hold on tight to everything, right? Like they're very fearful, I find. And yet some others, and I'm sure you can think of examples in your life of people who have very different financial mindsets. Some people who maybe don't even have any business being that way are quite free with their money, whereas some people who are sitting on loads of it are, fearful to spend it or reluctant to spend it for whatever reason. I like to try to help a family convey to mom why, you know what, this would be a great idea for you. It's not a
right,
splurge, it's not an indulgence, it's actually
right.
really
Give
appropriate. And so
give yourself 5 minutes to just sit down.
yeah, and yeah, like how nice it is to go out to a like whatever, go out even for a walk, come home and the house is clean. Like, yes, I mean, wouldn't we all
Right,
love? And I think just helping people feel a little bit less of a charge or the fear around the cost and more empowered around the value and peace and how, and again, those things are difficult to put a price tag on. When people look back and say, could we have done it cheaper? Well, like for some people, the money isn't the only factor. Lots of people have oodles of money, right? It's
right.
not just, but we do, I do find, especially with, people on fixed incomes, that it can be an ordeal. And yet I'm very also, I think I mentioned the sustainable healthy living, age-wise is in the B Lab. I don't know if you're familiar with what a B Corporation is, but we want to be seen as a force for good on the planet. We
Right.
want to be seen as making a difference too. So while I can provide paper copies of things, because seniors often like to
To
hold the
read.
paper,
Yep.
we want to meet people where they're at, but we're not going to blindly send it, because from an environmental standpoint and ours, running a business, I don't want to have to pass on the cost of printing to my consumer. If they can
Right.
use things digitally or print it at their home printer, then I don't need to charge them for that. You know what I mean? So trying to be that sustainability, and then also offering people, if they're open to exploring options financially, personally, me, and this is just my own personal mission, I will always invest first in a B Corporation because of their commitment to people and planet. And to me, that's just a really important central part of what I do. I didn't even mention that I'm also a consultant with Arbonne. I've been doing that for 12 years, like supporting my own healthy living and healthy aging, nourishing my body and using great skincare. But have learned a lot about supply chain and how we can make sure that as much as possible as the money we're spending ends up in the hands of the people who really are earning that money, not just the shareholders of the company that's profiting. Of course, we want to be a profitable company. We want the businesses we support to be profitable also, but helping guide people towards, like, if they have if they're going to make a move to an investment that's really good for the planet and there's a comparable investment that's not, we hope that we could convey to that person the importance of voting with your dollars and investing here. And this is why. Again, decisions up to them. They could invest in
Perfect.
whatever they want, but just educating people about why us voting with our dollars as taxpayers, even in consumers of our own, like in our own,
Right.
this,
No, and
this sort of push towards-
I love the philosophy of, that not only are you helping people, but you're also helping the greater good. So I want to thank you so much. I mean, there's so many takeaways from here, and Magic Makers, make sure that you are following her. Where can they find you on the socials?
Okay, I'm on LinkedIn as well as Instagram. I've got a couple of different Instagram profiles because, again, there's a few streams here. So you can real estate stuff. I'm just getting started with that Age Wise
So,
Agent.
yep.
But the sort of well-being and like elevating our well-being stuff is at Age Wise Pro on Instagram. And then the Age Wise group is also on Instagram for the consultant.
Perfect.
I got new, so not a lot there just yet, but can find us on our website at agewisegroup.com. The first consultations are free. Please feel, book with confidence. There's no obligation. Just want to help people figure out a starting point and point them in the right direction if it's not
Perfect.
us. Yeah.
So all of this stuff will be linked in the show notes. So don't feel like you're racing to write everything down. So absolutely, if you are dealing with an aging parent, absolutely have a conversation with Leslie. I'm going to link in the show notes here. I did a podcast several years ago with my own personal attorney about creating trust and wills and health proxies and all of the other stuff. That is also another conversation to have with your aging parent. Again, thank you so much for your time, Leslie, and Magic Makers. Please don't sleep on this. Please, please, please. It is coming for you, sadly, but it's something that we can prepare for.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be heavy. It can honestly be like really liberating. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share what I'm doing. As I said, I really feel like it's the work I was meant to do, but I always love a conversation. So thank you for the opportunity to share.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. All right, Magic Makers, enjoy the rest of your day.